Bruno Didier, we're here today to talk about customer experience. And you have tremendous expertise in that area because before you were working with Apple as VP Marketing in Europe. And you're giving us a talk today which is entitled, if I get it right, An Insanely Great Customer Experience at Apple. So clearly, Apple, customer experience goes nicely together. Was that always the case?
Yes, indeed, yes. Since the beginning in 1977, and this DNA, very particular to Apple, is very much linked to Steve Jobs' obsession, I would say. Obsession with the fact that the client must have the best possible experience with Apple products and our services. And it's amazing when you look at the way Apple operates today, even with its size, that this DNA forces processes, if we can speak about processes at Apple, into the operations. And if you look at the different opportunities that a brand like Apple has to touch or to communicate to their customers, there are basically four big categories. One is advertising. The second one is distribution, where to find the products. The third one are the products themselves, what you feel when you use and the products. And the fourth is what happens when you want to upgrade or change or add more stuff to your products. And Apple has always been very adamant to keep control of this customer experience. And you can think that among the four stages I mentioned, one is pretty tricky, which is distribution, because this is the point of the customer travel where Apple doesn't control everything. When you buy your iPhone from a Vodafone shop in London, you don't buy it by Apple. And if you are wrongly advised, you might not buy an Apple product. So Apple today is spending a lot of resources to even try to control these bits of the customer experience that they don't control 100%.
Now, my understanding is that you're involved in what we call mystery shopping, that in fact you're using mystery shopping to help control, manage that customer experience. Is that so?
That's perfectly correct. I'm now involved in this activity, and I do work as a consultant for Apple. And this is where I can gauge how important it is for Apple to make sure that even this sale action doesn't happen within the Apple brand. It is still done according to the Apple standards. And the standards are just incredibly high for all those four stages.
So we've got there almost a notion of what you could call a branded experience then. I mean, we're actually when we talk about customer experience, we think we know what it is, but I mean, when you break it down, I mean, what are the things, the different bits of that you focus on when you're working on the customer experience?
Simplicity. Easy to say, much more difficult to achieve.
Indeed, yeah.
And it starts with the advertising. I'm sure you've noticed that Apple ads are always straightforward.
Very.
Very few things, one key things. Distribution, it has to be simple. That's why also Apple decided to invest a huge amount of resource into their own stores. And going to an Apple store today, everywhere in the world, you'll find the same closely tied relations. The third point are products. The obsession, again, it's really an obsession at all the corporate levels, including the CEO level. The obsession is to make sure that the customer has a straightforward experience just to get into the products. Okay? The best experience was this iPhone when Apple got to the mobile phone market. There's just one button, that's it. And this was the objective for Apple to get on the smartphone market, just one button to operate. So products, and obviously the fourth category is once you have products, making sure that you can keep spending more money with Apple in a very straightforward way. Okay, so buying product applications or buying additional components.
Okay, I mean we've all heard about the sort of obsessive nature of Steve Jobs with the products, you know, and how you sort of, you know, you have to make sure the products are simple and the interface is wonderful and how they get sort of sent back again to be, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, just to focus on that, I mean, how is the customer experience managed through the product then? I mean, you say simplicity. Could we take that a little bit further?
Yeah, it even goes beyond the product itself. It starts with packaging. Once you get your box, it has to be straightforward. Not only it has to be straightforward, but it has to be a very pleasant experience when you open the box. You need to have nice surprises, like the box opens straight. You don't have the Scotch tape to remove or whatsoever. When you turn the product on, the battery is already loaded, okay? And there is a routine, software routine, that allows you to configure the unit almost immediately. Immediately not, it might take something like 2 minutes to do it. But you are being asked very simple question, very straightforward question. It's not like, what is your VPN number? You see, which country are you in? Or what's your name? What's your phone number? You know, a very straightforward question to make sure that the software use this simple information to do very tricky and complicated configuration in the unit. Okay, simplifications always go also to the shape. It has to be simple, and difficult also to keep simplicity when you are talking about such concentration of technology. But Steve Jobs and his lieutenants were always very eager to not give up on this simplicity at the cost of possibly introducing a product with certain delay or making the product more expensive. But at the end of the day, it's straightforward, it's simple. It's simple for the user, much less simpler for Apple to do it, to make it simple and to keep it simple.
Okay, I can see that. Now, let's move to the world of, I mean, services, of course, make things a little bit more complicated already. I mean, how then do you manage a customer experience, keep that kind of level of obsession and simplicity when you're dealing with service situations? You've got all sorts of different things coming in there, and of course, you know, you've got people involved and so on and so on. How do you then move on to services and make sure you've got the same degree of obsessiveness, if you like?
Okay, there are two sides. One is a service in terms of physical interaction with a human, the customer and a human. And Apple Store, the Apple stores, there are more than 460 Apple stores around the world today, are the logical place for Apple to be able to take care of their customers who might have some difficulty, technical difficulties with the units, okay? And here you have the Apple sales, I'm sorry, they are not salespeople, they are just specialists. The Apple specialist with a t-shirt in the Apple Store that will always welcome an Apple user, even though he or she didn't buy their products in an Apple Store, but from another store. Okay, so as an Apple owner, you'll be always welcome in an Apple Store if you have an advice to ask for. So that's the human piece. Now, from a software standpoint, if you are at home and you have a particular issue, an upgrade issue, upgrading is very easy. Again, you won't have to key in 10 different steps. You just have an option, you punch it, you are being asked straightforward questions in your language, it's not computer language, and it happens very smoothly. So Apple is doing a lot of work behind your back and behind this software to make sure that what you see is simple and happens properly, the way you want.
Let's go back to the Apple stores, because they're striking, aren't they? I mean, if you've been in an Apple store, you really notice it. But of course, at the same time, it's good just to be able to analyze and see what's happening there to impact our experience. And what are the key components of that Apple Store experience in your mind?
The brief for the Apple specialist is that they have to greet a customer not like as a revenue maker for the day he or she visits the store, but as a friend that has to be made feel like at home in his world. The idea being that long term, this customer feels comfortable with the brand, with the product, is not intimidated, actually think, oh, they are nice guys. Nice product, but nice guys. So the specialists are really briefed to create this atmosphere. They don't have any revenue objective. They don't have any time constraints in terms of what they spend with each customer. Their brief is feel this person as one of your friends that you would entertain at your place so that he feel or she feels his place.
And it's noticeable. I mean, one thing that I always notice is that there's no cash till. I mean, it's very simple, isn't it, really? But I mean, you know, it's you walk into a space which is. What was the model for that? I mean, where did Apple look to get ideas for that space? Because it is a wonderful space, isn't it?
Very simple and very complex. The idea was it has to be simple. The idea was this customer or potential customer should not be intimidated by technology. This customer should feel like at home, comfortable, understand what's happening. And that's why you mentioned the cashier point, is that when you are in a discussion with this Apple specialist and you talk, I don't know, about, let's say, an iPhone, and you say, oh, I like it, do you have it in stock? And you would tell me, yes, for sure. Okay, okay, I'll get it. And then the Apple specialist would pull out of his pocket one iPhone on which you would key in, okay, what's your name? Do you have an email address? And you'd get the invoice, and your iPhone would be with you within like 30 seconds. Okay, so you don't have to go to the cashier to make this frustrating thing of pulling out your wallet. You stay with the person you talk to, you had a chat with,
Yes.
and very naturally, oh, you want it? Yeah, sure. Okay, what's your name? Okay, you have a credit card? Yeah. Email address? Fine. And the transaction is completed like that, 30 seconds.
Are there different roles within? Is everybody a consultant in there, or are there different roles, different titles as well?
You'll find the basic quote specialists who are here to take care of people like guests. You have people sitting behind this bar, which are called geniuses.
That's at the Genius Bar, isn't
Yeah,
it? Yes,
Genius
of course,
Bar.
which of course isn't
So if you are
idea.
becoming very comfortable with your products and you found a way that you could do these particular things, you're not sure how you do it, you can take an appointment through internet, and you get this appointment with a, I would say, specialized technician who would show you how to do it and how you can get even more out of your product than what you would normally do. So those people have a kind of a higher level of technical skills, and they would go down into the details of a particular configuration or software. And then behind the wall, you have those Apple other specialists who fix the units. Like if you drop your laptop on the floor and the screen is broken, you can go there with an appointment, and you know that your laptop will stay in the back room and it will not be shipped to Belgium or Singapore to be fixed. You know that someone in the back room that you might physically see will fix your computer. And that's another reflection of the obsession to get things simple. Yeah, the guy in the back room will fix it for you. Come back tomorrow, it will be done.
Does this present challenges in terms of recruitment and training to get the right people? Because obviously there's an attitude there, isn't there? There's a sort of corporate culture that you have to fit into, and you've got to want to play that game and play it properly. Is it a challenge to find the right kind of people?
Yeah, the recruitment is just amazing. Also, notwithstanding the huge challenge that Apple had to staff 400 plus stores around the world,
suddenly, yes,
with a huge amount of sales representatives or specialists. So Apple put together centrally, I mean, this is a worldwide organization. This is done out of Cupertino in California. They do have very specific recruiting criteria, and it's really funny. They won't look at your degree. They will look at what motivates you in life, what you feel you want to do, your personal, your interrelationship skill. They would really look at that, at the willingness you have to go and promote Apple products, to go out and promote Apple's products that will change the world. That's really the idea. And you know, they create for the recruitment. So they make group interviews. They create an ambiance with a particular kind of music, you know, the 50s, 60s, 70s, I would say 60s, 70s rock music. And they really try to see those people who feel comfortable in this Apple environment. And then you have briefings on what is expected, and then each individual are asked how they would react to this briefing.
Okay, now that's a channel where Apple controls everything.
Yep.
I mean, they recruit, they manage, they train, etc., etc. Now, you've also got other channels where you're a little bit less in control, perhaps, which most of us know. I mean, I can buy Apple at a Fnac, I can buy it in a telephone shop, etc., etc. How do you manage that situation? Because there, in terms of control, of course, your control presumably is weakening a little bit. So, how do you manage that customer experience there?
First, it's much easier today for Apple to control that than what it was 10 or 15 years ago, because the weight of Apple in the consumer world is just huge. And I cannot think of any retailer in the world that will tell you, well, I can do business without Apple. Yes. I don't think. Okay, so, but despite that, that doesn't dilute the effort that Apple has been always doing with the channel. Here again, Apple has been always very nervous about the fact that they had to subcontract part of the customer experience to outsiders who might not have always the same objectives. Okay, so what Apple does today is they spend quite a lot of resources to go and check what's happening for a client when he goes to one of those outlets. When this client gets to the store, say, hey, I'm looking for a notebook, I'm looking for a smartphone, to see how those salespeople who are not Apple salespeople react to this kind of request. And obviously, as you know, the terms and conditions of a particular brand with a particular retailer are quite complex. There are some qualitative components. So Apple wants to make sure that they have hard data to justify why this retailer has been doing very well with Apple and then should have good qualitative incentives, or this retailer didn't do. And this is where they use mystery shoppers to go and check with a particular scenario what's happening truly in a channel. When someone goes there and I say, hey, I'm interested in a notebook on iPhone.
Are these exchanges scripted? I mean, there are sort of companies which actually script the exchanges in the service experience, or is it more about a sort of attitude and outlook? I mean, how what are the elements of control? There?
In this particular case, as opposed to the Apple Store, where the employees are not paid by Apple, therefore they are not controlled, they are not shaped, or they are not massaged by Apple. In this case, you have to follow a particular script, a pretty standard script. So how you welcome. Those people say hello to you, they look into your eyes. Yeah. What do they tell you? What do they recommend? Do they recommend Samsung or Apple? What do they tell you about Apple? Did they get the last training right? In other words, for instance, if the camera is the high point on the iPhone 6, does the salesperson mention that, or does he mention other things? Is the Apple department clean? Are the demonstration units hooked on internet? Are they simply on? So these are very, very precise things. It can be only yes or no.
Tick them down.
Right, and then you can have your compliance rate, and then you can say, well, Vodafone across the UK achieved a 73% compliance rate. Bad, last time was 78. Or less, yeah. So that's very strict, very precise.
Okay. I mean, in the time that you've spent at Apple, if there was one thing that you've learned which you think was game-changing for you, I mean, really something that you'd like to convey to young people who are moving into business, what would that be?
There are many things, and especially since now I'm on the consulting side of the business, the more I go into that, the more I'm with different companies I do consult for, the more I realize how deep and how strong the learnings was when I worked with Steve Jobs and his team. And I would say the one that I'm just being addicted now is just simplicity. Even to the extreme points that I refuse to try to understand or to be explained complicated things. Because I'm telling to myself, if I need to be explain that in such detail, then that's very complicated.
How am I going to communicate it as well?
Exactly. And frankly, this has become for me an obsession. And every time, I'm involved with particular business situation in some companies who I don't work with, but I'm consulting for, every time I tell the management, listen, guys, that's too complicated. The only issue with that is when you say that, you look like a dummy, because simplicity is not a way to show that you are very bright. Sure. If you show complex things, people might not understand them, but people will assume that you are very bright because you explain something complicated.
And I can't understand it, therefore you must be bright.
Exactly. Yeah. And this is really what you have to fight on a daily basis, because if you let it go, you go back to the world of complexity. And frankly, if you look at this Apple brand strength today, I think it all goes back to when Jobs got into the business thing. I want to make a computer that's being usable by everyone in the world. Okay, so it has to be simple. And obviously the notion of simplicity in 1977 is not the same as it is today with an iPhone.
Yeah.
But still, you'll find this is the common link that Apple never gave up on that. And obviously Jobs was a key driver for that.
But it does take an obsessive focus, doesn't it?
It does.
I mean, this is what we're talking about, is that focusing on keeping it simple, not doing lots of things that we don't want to do, saying no to certain things as well.
Exactly.
And making sure you're absolutely focused on that.
So many things that the human nature doesn't like.
Absolutely.
And that's why you need to have an incredible leadership like Jobs had to make sure that they could keep his organization. And funny enough, is 4 years after his death, it's interesting to realize that his team, I mean the Apple management team, keeps this obsession. I mean, it's kind of contagious. I mean, I believe I got a contagion, and I'm trying now to proliferate that because I think it's extremely powerful.
Just one last question. In terms of, I know we've spoken a lot about Apple, but now you've seen other companies as well, working as a consultant and so on, and looking out there at other companies managing customer experiences as well. Is there any other company that you've identified that you would have some degree of admiration for?
No, and that's because the bar was
bar
set
is so
very
high.
high. Okay.
Yeah.
Frankly, I am not being too pompous, but I'm very disappointed when I see major brands like American Express, for instance, not particular, but I would say those kind of companies. Those companies know exactly what you spend as a client.
Yes.
But when you know the kind of offer they extend to you, it's very disappointing because most of the time it's not relevant to you. And you say, why do I get that? It's not me. To my no answer, there would be an exception, I think. Amazon is, I think, made very strong inroads in a sense of trying to propose to you things that you might like based on what you bought before.
Yes.
And I think this would be the light at the beginning of the tunnel. They are. But the thing is, overall, and the companies I work with are so much happy to have huge amount of data about their customers that they tend to lose the objective that they should exploit those data. And they don't do it. They don't do it in a smart way. Why? Because this is an additional cost, this is a marketing cost, this is an investment, and the return on that is quite long. And only companies like Amazon can afford to look at this kind of investment horizon.
So, in conclusion, simple is smart or smart is simple?
Simple is incredibly difficult, but incredibly powerful.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you.